Now in the next paragraph of the essay of friendship, Bacon goes on to talk about the second fruit or the second benefit of friendship. Let me read that. The second fruit of friendship is healthful and sovereign for the understanding, as the first is for the affections. For friendship maketh indeed a fair day in the affections from storms and tempests, but it maketh daylight in the understanding out of darkness and confusion of thoughts. So he says that just like friendship helps us in dealing with the affections, it helps us, it saves us from storms and tempests. So when you are, it's a stormy day, when there is a stormy day, in the sense when you are upset, when you are worried, when you are in a tempestuous mood, a friend comes in, you share it with him, and he makes the day a fair day. Means he solves your problems, your sorrows are lightened. Same way, in the case of understanding, sometimes when your brain is muddled, when you're not able to make proper judgments, when you cannot understand something, sharing it or telling it to your friend can make daylight out of darkness. When you're lost in darkness, not knowing how to tackle a certain issue, when a friend can help you to bring in light. That is what he means by saying it maketh daylight in the understanding out of darkness and confusion of thoughts. Neither is this to be understood only of faithful counsel which a man receiveth from his friend, but before you come to that, certain it is that whosoever hath his mind fraught with many thoughts, his wits and understanding do clarify and break up in the communicating and discoursing with another. He tosseth his thoughts more easily. He marshalleth them more orderly. He seeth how they look when they are turned into words. Finally, he waxeth wiser than himself, and that more by an hour's discourse than by a day's meditation. So he says that when you are confused, you can always talk to a friend, and it is not just talking to only a faithful counsel that you receive from a friend, but if you simply talk, even voicing out your feelings helps you sort it out. It is not necessary that your friend should be a very intelligent person, a person who is brilliant in finding solutions. Even that is not necessary. You just need somebody there to sit in front of you. You just talk to them. Once you start talking, once you start pouring out your feelings, you can see that you yourself get a better understanding of what is going on in your mind. Now that is what happens in counseling, isn't it? When you go to a counselor, the counselor, when you are tormented by a problem. So why do people go to counselors or psychologists for counseling? What does a counselor do? Does a counselor give you a solution to a problem? No. The counselor actually encourages you to talk. So as the person talks, as the person reveals his feelings, he himself gets a better idea of what's going on in his mind. He himself is able to understand what his mistakes are. When he says, okay, this is what I said to my wife this morning and she got angry, and then you realize that you shouldn't have said that. You can't blame her for getting angry because what you said was not right. So you are able to analyze your thoughts, analyze your words. So expressing it itself helps a lot. So that is what he says here. Neither is this to be understood only of faithful counsel which a man receiveth from his friend, but before you come to that, even before you get a counsel or an advice from a friend, certain it is that whosoever hath his mind fraught with many thoughts, fraught in the sense troubled with a lot of thoughts, his wits and understanding do clarify and break up. So when you communicate, when you discourse or talk, discoursing here only means talking with another person, slowly your understanding clarifies and it breaks up and you understand things better. he tosseth his thoughts more easily. He tosseth only means that he tosseth and then he marshalleth them more orderly. In the sense, he is able to arrange them and he is able to tackle his feelings in a more orderly fashion. He seeth how they look when they turned into words. So when he talks about it, he understands what exactly he said, what exactly he thought of. Is this what he really thought? It gets a better clarity. Finally, he waxeth wiser than himself, and that more by an hour's discourse than by a day's meditation. So, if you spend 1 hour discussing your thoughts with somebody, that would be better than spending a whole day of meditation. You sit alone and meditate on your thoughts. Things will only get more complicated. Instead, you call a friend, ask somebody to sit there in front of you, and you talk out your feelings. That will be more effective in solving the problem. It was well said by Themistocles, the king of Persia, that speech was like cloth of arras, opened and put abroad, whereby the imagery doth appear in figure, whereas in thoughts they lie but as in packs. Okay, so that's another thing he says. He just elaborates, he gives us an example to clarify the earlier point that he made, that how talking itself helps a lot. And he says, Themistocles. Now, Themistocles was an Athenian statesman, and he was responsible for the defeat of the Persians at the Battle of Salamis. Okay, so Themistocles has said to the king of Persia that speech is like a cloth of arras. Now, Arras, Arras, it's a name of a place actually in France, and here the cloth of Arras is a tapestry. A tapestry is a cloth on which a design is woven. Here, the place Arras was known for its tapestry. So that is what is called the cloth of Arras. And it used to it was a tapestry with intricately stitched designs. And it was named after the French city where it was made. That is why the cloth of Arras. And so Themistocles said that speech is like a cloth of Arras, opened and put abroad. So a tapestry is meant to be displayed. You have to stretch it out and put it on the wall. And then what happens? The imagery that appear in figures. So everything, you can see the figures. You can understand what the person who made the tapestry is trying to tell us when you see it in full display. Whereas if you keep it packed, if you keep it folded, you don't know what the tapestry contains. You can't see the design. You have no idea of the design. That is exactly how it is when you don't talk. Your thoughts are all packed and folded. You don't know what is inside. But once you open it up, you display it, you talk about it, things become very clear. So that's a very good comparison, isn't it? So we know that Bacon is a master of giving apt comparisons. Neither is this second fruit of friendship in opening the understanding restrained only to such friends are able to give a man counsel. They indeed are best, but even without that, a man learneth of himself and bringeth his own thoughts to light, and whetteth his wits against a stone, which itself cuts not. In a word, a man were better relate himself to a statue or a picture than to suffer his thoughts to pass in smother. So he says, this particular point that we now made about opening up and trying to understand things better, it is not restrained to friends are as able to give a man counsel, in the sense that it need not be, I mentioned that earlier, you need not always talk to a very clever friend, a very intelligent friend who can give you good advice. They indeed are best means, of course, if the friend is a very intelligent man, it's very good. But even any friend would do, for that matter, any person, you just need to talk. And that's why he says, you can even talk to a statue or a picture than to suffer and and let them all smother in your mind. So you just, talking is what is more important here. If it's a clever and a wise friend who can help you, well and good. But even otherwise, it helps you to learn about yourself. When you bring your thoughts to light, wetteth his bits against a stone. Wetteth, that is when to make a knife sharp, what do? You rub it against a stone. That is called wetting. Okay, so here that is the function of this listener. You talk, he listens. Maybe he offers advice, maybe he doesn't, he simply listens to you. But in this process of talking, your thoughts become sharp. Like whetting a knife against a stone, you get a better understanding of yourself. And though itself cuts not, the stone doesn't cut. What is the purpose of the stone? It's only to sharpen the knife. So there, the purpose of the friend is not to advise you or help you, but it's just he just sits there and listens to you. That itself helps, and that is why he says in the last line, you can even talk to a statue or a picture for that matter, than to sit and allow yourself to be smothered by your thoughts. Reveal them, talk openly. That will bring you a lot of peace of mind and joy. So going on to the next paragraph, add now, to make this fruit of friendship complete, that other point which lieth more open, and falleth within vulgar observation, which is faithful counsel from a friend. So earlier he had already said that second fruit of friendship is that even your sharing helps. And he says, add with that one more thing, that is good counsel. If your friend is able to give you good counsel, that's the best thing that can happen. Falleth within vulgar observation. Vulgar only means common. Anybody can understand that. If you have a friend who can give you excellent advice, that would be the best. Heraclitus saith well in one of his enigmas, dry light is ever the best. And certain it is that the light that a man receiveth by counsel from another is drier and purer than that which cometh from his own understanding and judgment, which is ever infused and drenched in his affections and customs. So he says, Heraclitus again is another ancient Greek philosopher, and he says in one of his works that dry light is ever the best. So what exactly he means by dry light, let us read further. So he says that a man, the counsel is advice that a man receives from another person is drier and purer than which comes from his own understanding. See, I have a problem, and so I try to find a solution for it by my own judgment and understanding. And sometimes what happens is my understanding of things might be flawed, F-L-A-W-E-D. It might have problems, which is ever infused and drenched in his affections and customs, because my thought process, the way I think, will definitely be colored by my affections. Affections here means my interests and my customs. So the decision that I take might be a biased decision because it's colored by my interests, whereas another person, a good friend, a wise friend, the advice that he gives would be pure as dry light, in the sense it will not be colored by any sort of feeling, because he will be able to give you a more honest judgment of things. So as there is as much difference between the counsel that a friend giveth that a man giveth himself, as there is between the counsel of a friend and of a flatterer. For there is no such flatterer as is a man's self, and there is no such remedy against flattery of a man's self as the liberty of a friend. So he says that there is definitely a lot of difference between the advice given by a friend and the advice that you give yourself. And what is the difference between the two? One is the counsel of a friend, the other is the counsel of a flatterer. What does he mean by that? He says that there is no such flatterer as is a man's self. This very idea he has mentioned in another essay too. I think it is in the essay of love, where Bacon says that the greatest flatterer of a man's self is himself. That is true, isn't it? Because we all think very high and we all think that we are the best. So then, when we take decisions, we might take wrong decisions because we have a feeling that all that we do is right. So that is why he says, when you take a decision on your own, that might be the decision of a flatterer, a counsel of a flatterer. Whereas a friend can give you a more, wise kind of a judgment or an advice. And the remedy against flattery of a man's self is the liberty of a friend. So the best remedy against your own flattery of yourself is the liberty of a friend. In the sense, a good friend will always give you an honest answer. And a good friend will point out your mistakes and tell you, see, this decision is not right because what you are thinking is not how it is. So a friend will be able to, bring you out of the false picture that you have made about yourself. Counsel is of two. Now, before I go on to that, we know that what is wrong with a flatterer? A flatterer is a person who would tell you things in order to gain something from that, isn't it? You should never trust a flatterer, because a flatterer, just like you have the story, the emperor's new clothes, the emperor was walking around in his undergarments and everybody said, oh, the dress is wonderful. And what happens at the end of the story? A small child says that, but the emperor is only wearing his underclothes. And that is the reality. But the flatterers who want to get something from you, they will never tell you about your faults. Whatever you do, they'll say that's the best thing to do. But a good friend will tell you, see, this is not right. You may not like what I'm telling you, but I can't help it. I have to tell you the truth. What you're doing is not right. Only a good friend can do that. So that is the difference here. A good friend can give you a good counsel, whereas you might look at yourself as a flatterer does. So going on to the next point, counsel is of two sorts. The one concerning manners, the other concerning business. So he says counsel or advice. There are two kinds of advice that you may receive. One is the advice that you receive about your manners or your behavior. And the other concerning business, concerning your job or your business or your whatever, your career. That is the second type. And in the first one, he says, for the first, the best preservative to keep the mind in health is the faithful admonition of a friend. So for the first one, as far as your manners, your behavior is concerned, to keep your mind healthy, the best medicine is the admonition of a faithful friend. Admonition, scolding, chiding. Here it only means advice. When a faithful friend advises you, that is actually the best medicine to keep your mind intact and to behave well. The calling of a man's self to a strict account is a medicine, sometimes too piercing and corrosive. Reading good books of morality is a little flat and dead. Observing your faults in others is sometimes improper for our case. So he says, when you try to make a judgment of yourself, sometimes it might be too piercing. You can't be too self-critical. You may not sometimes take the right decision about yourself. Same way, trying to learn things from books again is not a very practical thing. Reading good books of morality to improve yourself, you can't always go on reading books and learning from that. That is a little flat and dead. Observing our faults in others is sometimes improper for our case. So you see that another person has a fault and you think that, oh, I too have this. But that again may not be a very practical thing, because that person is a different person, and you may have a different reason for your behavior. He may behave that way because of something else. So you can't look at another person and try to improve yourself. But the best receipt, best I say to work, and the best to take is the admonition of a friend. So the best possible remedy is to listen to the advice of your friend. It is better than making judgments on your own. It is better than get the information that you get from books. It is even better than looking at another person's fault and trying to improve yourself on those lines, because that may not work for you. So the best thing is to listen to a good friend and his advice. It is a strange thing to behold what gross errors and extreme absurdities many, especially of the greater sort, do commit for want of a friend to tell of them, to the great damage both of their fame and their fortune. For as St. James saith, they are as men that look sometimes into a glass and presently forget their own shape and favour. So he says that there are so many cases of people, that too not ordinary people, but great men, wise men. There are so many examples of the errors, gross errors and absurdities that some people have done, just because they did not have a friend to advise, for want of a friend to tell them of them, and to the great damage. And such mistakes have led to the loss of their fame and fortune. So many great men have fallen because there was nobody to advise them. And for, as St. James saith, they are like men that look into the glass and presently forget their own shape and favour. So I couldn't find a reference for that, but from what I understand, St. James has said that when you look at the glass here I think is the mirror. So you look at the mirror every day, and what happens? You forget your own shape and favour, in the sense that when you look at the mirror every day, you won't be able to find the subtle differences in your countenance or in your body, because the changes are gradual, and you look at it every day. You don't, like, for instance, when somebody sees you after a long time, they might tell you, oh, you've become very fat, or they might tell you, oh, you've become extremely thin. So then, but a person who sees you every day may not notice that, because they see you every day, they get used to what you are. But somebody who sees you after a long time can immediately recognize the difference in you. They can distinguish the difference from what you were earlier and what you are now. So the idea here is, when you try to judge yourself, you may not be able to, because you are used to your behavior, and you, even if it's something wrong, you may be doing it every day and you do not realize it. So I think that is what he means by saying that they are as men that look sometimes into a glass and presently forget their own shape and favour. So it is always best for another person who knows us well, a good friend, for them to pass judgments on us. And it's always good that if this friend is trustworthy, for us to take the advice to, because that will help us. It will definitely do no harm. Okay, so that was about your manners. So if a good friend tells you, see, your behavior is not right, you are being very rude to people, this is not how you should behave. Or if somebody tells you that you are too soft, you should be a little more assertive. If people say that to you, it is better that you receive and act upon that advice. That will only do you good. So that was the first kind of advice, counsel regarding your manners.